Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the Open Concept Podcast, where we are breaking down unnecessary walls and barriers that stand in the way of greatness. I'm your host, Brandon Smith. Our guest today, Austin McMillan from Sweet Home, Birmingham, Alabama.
That's right.
How you doing, brother?
I am doing great, Brandon. I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Is that a song that is appreciated in Alabama, Sweet Home Alabama, or is that like when you go out and that song comes on, is that something where you guys are like, turn it up, or is it just, hey, this is kind of a tiresome song, we don't like hearing it anymore, we get it. What goes on?
I would say most people still very much appreciate it. In fact, if you go, there's two schools in Alabama. You got Alabama, obviously from a football. We're in the football region,
right?
You got Alabama. I went to Auburn, which is the rival. But when you go to Alabama, which is the main stadium, in the state, that is the song you hear the most that they blare over the loudspeakers. So it's very much a theme of the state for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. College football, huge Canada. Like here in Canada, the college football is like, it's pretty much non-existent. A lot of college football fans of the schools down in the States here in Canada, but not a lot of college ball down here. But it is, if anyone's ever been to a college football game, they are, man, like lights out in the stadium. It's like you get the marching band. It's just packed in there. It's a good time.
It's a very unique experience. Yeah, really, really cool atmosphere. It's pretty awesome, especially down in the Southeast where we are. It's like it is the sport that everybody pays attention to.
Yes, absolutely. So Flywheel Financial. Before we get into it, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? I would love to know a little bit of your background before we get into talking about some financial stuff, which I know everyone will be really eager to get into as well.
I love it, Brandon. Yeah. So, born and raised in Alabama. I live in Birmingham. Obviously, I grew up about an hour east of here. But man, my journey is one of those where I tell people I got to learn by just diving into the deep end to learn. And so I've had some random experiences throughout my life to learn about what I love, what I don't love. So anything from, I worked on a cattle ranch in Nebraska for a little bit, traded options in the stock market for a season of my life, worked for a landscape industry for a really long time. On the financial side of the landscape industry, I was there for 7 years. I think we went through 12 acquisitions. Whoa. And so was really on like a strict growth plan. And I got to see kind of behind the scenes of evaluating businesses, going into buying, what markets are they in, while they were just they were owned by an investment group, basically.
So sorry, the 12 acquisitions, so the company that you were with at the time was acquired 12 different times, or they made 12 different purchases?
Okay. Purchased 12 different companies in those 7 years. Yeah.
Got it.
So I worked for a company that was owned by an investment group, and they were on the 5-year flip, basically. They were like on a strict plan, growth through acquisition. And then over those 5 years, they were just going to sell to the bigger, PE firm or whoever it was that was going to buy the next deal. And so in those 7 years I was there, we actually were owned for all 7 years by the same investment group. Purchased a bunch of mom and pop landscape businesses kind of around our region of the Southeast.
Yeah.
And got to play a part of that and just see how business evaluation and how finances played into it. It was just a lot of fun for me.
Can we talk about that for a minute? Because I'm very interested in different acquisition strategies.
Yeah.
What did you learn with landscaping company? Because a lot of people, they think, hey, we're gonna acquire, whether it, a lot of them, it's software companies, but when you talk about acquisition of blue collar or trades type companies, you mentioned landscape businesses, for example. I mean, that's my wheelhouse, right? I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
that because I understand marketing, I understand the customer, I understand the people that are involved in growing and scaling the companies. But I love that world there. What did you learn about these companies specifically when you're looking at analyzing? Let's take the landscape company for example.
yeah,
What
yeah.
did you learn when you were looking at acquiring these types of companies, or what people were typically looking for to acquire a company like a landscape firm?
Yeah, so obviously, like you mentioned, much different than the software space or any of these other industries. In the blue collar service based industry world, so much of it depended on contractual revenue. So that's
Right.
really what we were honed in on, is to say, like, okay, what does your contractual recurring revenue look like from now into the future based on your current set of customer bases? And in fact, we'll get into Flywheel Financial in a minute, but it's hard, especially with smaller industries or smaller businesses in those industries, to really trust the books, to say, like, it's not really a
Mm,
multiple of EBITDA or multiple of profit. You're actually having to base off of just like, okay, send us your customer list. We're going to see how
yeah.
much each one of those customers is paying
Yeah,
you.
we're gonna call them independently and just make sure that they're gonna renew their
Are you
contracts
real?
next year.
That's right. But yeah, so they're just looking at revenue, and then it was a multiple of revenue.
Yeah.
And so they were coming in, and man, it's crazy, Brandon. I mean, I got to see people selling a company, that they were building for, 10, 15, 20 years for what I thought was not a great payout for what, of what they were selling it for. And once again, they were going in, we were, looking at these industries as a bigger conglomerate and a bigger, coming in to look at these companies. And a lot of these guys just wanted out, from,
Yeah.
managing employees or whatever it took that they felt the pain for. They just
Yeah.
wanted out, and they were willing to accept the check that we were writing to go buy those contracts essentially.
Yeah,
And
well, I
so,
find too a lot of there's not a lot of people start businesses without any real legacy plan in
yeah,
place, and
that's right.
then they get to a point where they're like, man, I've been doing this 15 years or 20 years or whatever, and I'm just kind of tired. I
Yeah,
want to try something else. I've been doing this for a long time. I've bootstrapped this business. I've got it to this point, and I don't know if I have the energy to take it any further. And I want to
yeah,
take that knowledge that I have and try that somewhere else, or just retire, spend more time with the kids, be
that's
healthier.
right.
And so when they're handed any form of check, they're like, cool, we can end this thing in the next 6 months.
Yeah,
That solves a lot of pain that I
yeah.
have. And so I could see why people would start accepting that check, because they never really started with the idea of this is how we're going to go and sell our businesses once we started, right?
It's so true, Brendan. I think to that same point, so many people walk in that mindset where they're not thinking about it when they start it, and then they basically are buying themselves a job when they get into this whole world. So they're an owner of a business, but they just have a full time job like a W-2, not thinking like an owner. And then, like you said, if it's time for them to retire or they're just sick of it, a lot of these people just close the doors because they don't know the value of the business that they've spent building over the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's a disservice to them just because they're not educated enough in the space to be like, man, I've spent 20 years doing one thing fairly well. Then
Yeah.
maybe I could go shop it around and make my systems a little bit better to increase the value. But they just not thinking that way. And so it's either they're shutting the doors or I'll take a baby check to just get it off my hands.
One of the phrases I loved, I went down, I did a couple of days with Alex and Layla Hormozy down in
Oh,
Vegas
wow.
at acquisition.com.
Yeah.
And it was really learning how because they analyze so many businesses in their portfolio company a month, right? They're looking at, I think it was like, a couple hundred businesses a
Oh, I
month. So
believe it.
they need a system to analyze businesses. So they've created their little box of requirements, and they stick to that, and they have an idea of how they score it. And there's value adders and there's value retractors. And so, revenue, profit, those are all value adders.
Yep.
And retractors are things, and one thing that I loved was key man risk. That was one
Oh,
thing that they were
cool. Yeah.
talking about. And so
Yeah.
what they determined that is like, okay, well, if a lot of the business is relied on one single person in the organization, then that is huge, what they call key man risk. And I don't know if that's, they coined the term. I've since then heard the term being used a number of
Yeah. I've heard
times.
it
Maybe
before
just
too.
I wasn't familiar with it prior,
Yeah.
but it makes a ton of sense, because that if there's a lot of risk, or the business's upside relies heavily on one or two very specific people. If those people leave, then the company's toast. So it's worth
Absolutely.
very little at that point.
That's
Right? It'd just
exactly
be
right.
easier. It'd be easier to start all over again.
And
So
that
key
was a
managers.
you're exactly right, Brandon. And that was a big thing that we saw in the landscape industry, right? Because these guys that started a landscape company from scratch, so much is relationally driven. And those guys that maybe have not surpassed the bigger companies that are still fairly small, all of their clients are relationally based on them being the main person that they call up if they got an issue, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of that went into play. And the reason why our company wasn't willing to write fatter checks is because they were like, we might lose 30% day one.
Yeah.
This contractual revenue, nothing's guaranteed. And so we just had to play the game. So it's still a smart investment on our end to get into that world.
There was a commercial that was on the radio, and I don't know if it was smart or what, but the advertisement, it was basically as a roofing contractor, right? It was a roofing repair contractor, and he had bought some time on the air, and he had said, you know what, hey, like when you call me, when you call our company, you get my cell phone number, and I am available to you 24 hours a day. And you know that if somebody's going to pick up the phone, it's going to be me that's picking up the phone. And he was taking a lot of pride in that. And I was like, "Ah, all right, all right. I wonder how long that's going to last before you're driven absolutely insane."
Yep.
But
Yeah,
that was what he
that's
was priding himself on.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of people do, but you're the bottleneck of the business, right?
Totally.
And so, yeah, I fully get that. I do not want to build a life like that for sure.
Yeah. So let's okay, so we learned a little bit about, we're talking about acquisition landscape,
Mhm.
mostly pain, but to really get into a good rhythm here. And I know this isn't how the podcast was, we were originally thinking it was going to go, but I do want to ask you, when the landscape companies were acquired, what were you typically looking for, or what sort of value was the firm looking to implement to really grow those companies? Was it just like, hey, we're looking to implement better software, better marketing, better systems, and that's gonna grow, or what were they looking for? And what was the upside that they were hoping to gain?
Yeah, great question. So obviously we specialized in commercial contractual revenue. So not
Okay.
residential, but we were mainly focused on commercial properties. And so that was the first criteria that they were looking at as we were pursuing a new market to go into. And if I back out even further, really when we would go through these acquisitions, we were looking at what is a city that kind of fits our mold for the cities that we would want to go into. Is it oversaturated with competition? Is it undersaturated? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
So they're doing analysis before they even touch the city. And then once you get into the city, then you're looking at potential size of businesses that have enough that they're not going to close shop tomorrow, but not too big. So you're not, I mean, and you know this in small business world, really the higher the revenue, the higher the multiple, just because it's a more tried and true business that's been around longer. It's got a history behind it. And so it was kind of finding that window of time to say like, okay, what's kind of that optimum price that we can buy in for? So I was looking in the contractual commercial side of the landscape world. And really we separated out revenue, contractual customers versus any assets. So those
Hmm.
were two completely different things. And we would pay a price for the contractual revenue, and then the assets, if they fit within our mold of like worth purchasing, you still would pay pennies on the dollar to get those assets because we're coming in because we had bigger buying power with all the major vendors in the space.
Yeah.
There was Ford or Chevy or any of the landscape equipment, all that stuff. We had the purchasing power, but that these little guys didn't. So the assets weren't very valuable in our eyes when we went into that world of saying like, okay, we're
Yeah.
from an asset standpoint, right?
Yeah, so you would have, they had a 2012 F-150 pickup truck, and they're like, "Hey, this thing's worth $30,000," and you're like, "Well, with our discounts, like we can get a brand new one for 50 grand or whatever
Exactly.
it is." So you're like, to us, it's not worth 25." So then it becomes in the eye of the beholder
That's
type
right. That's
scenario,
right.
right?
And then the other kicker of it too, and once again, this was fully up to the owner that we were talking with that was potentially selling the business, but there was a bonus incentive essentially to say like, hey, listen, if we buy your business tomorrow and we close tomorrow, we'll write you a check today. But then if you stay with us for a year and we'll pay you a market-based salary as the owner of that business to stay with us for a year, at the end of that year, if X amount of clients percentage base was still on with us at the end of that year, you'll get an additional bonus check that's part of that purchase price.
Yeah,
So that was another incentive that we tried to get a lot of these owners, because it's such a relational based business,
for
is to
sure.
say like, hey, listen, rather than you exit and just wipe your hands and walk away tomorrow, we'll give you a dangling carrot that says like, if you'll stay on for another year and help us get through the hard transition season of an acquisition, then it's worth us to pay you a pretty big fat bonus at the end of that as well.
How would you describe a hard transition season? Like what's involved with that? I imagine it's going to be new owners making new relationships with the market, but also like culture integration into a new company, right? You have a new leadership team and some legacy staff that have been there for,
Yep.
a number of years, and they're worried about their job, security. They're worried about their future. They're worried about whether or not we're gonna like to go out for a beer with this guy, or how this is going to affect things. Or hey, I had a handshake agreement that I could pick up my kid every day at 2:30. Is
That's
this
right.
owner still gonna honor that? So imagine like those types of things all come up. But
Yep.
yeah, what types of things do you typically come up against?
It was way more of a pain point on the employee side than it was on the customer side.
Right.
Because if you think about going back to the customer side, if we're focused on commercial landscaping, as long as we still show up and do the work every single day at this bank or this strip mall or this shopping center or whatever, they honestly are fine just making a phone call change to the next account manager, whoever's going to be over that account, right? As long
Yeah.
as we're still doing the work.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily the biggest pain point from the customer side, but the employee side is where it really rocked the boat. Because a lot of these guys, exactly what you just said, like they had handshake agreements with the owner that they've been having a relationship with for 15 years. They know certain nuances, and we're this new big brother coming in town that's like, hey, we do things completely different. You're going to be clocking in, clocking out in this system and all the things, right? And so it's just really probably just, people a lot of times are resistant to change. And we were throwing a lot of change at them on how they would operate, because we had a standard operating procedure on how we got things done, how you tackle the day that they probably were not used to prior to. And so that was the biggest hurdle that we had to face, to say, like, how many people that we need to show up to work to perform the work are not going to be there week
Yeah.
one, week two, week three after that acquisition.
What would you say the biggest, I suppose, solution to this hurdle, or things to work through, right? You go and you're introducing the new leadership team or the new owners to a number of these staff, and we're sitting down. Is it like, hey, we're taking the ship from here, and this is our way of doing it. Hit the road if you're either in or you're out. Or is it sort of hey, hey, we just want to get a handle on how things are going. We're here. We want to make sure that everything is a smooth transition. Like what types of conversations are you going in and having with these staff usually? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so the way it typically played out is that, through any kind of acquisition or purchase, it's hard for the owner to share that with the employees prior to the actual transaction date, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, everybody but the owner is hearing about this all at one time, right? So it's definitely a shock. And so that first day, typically what our team would do is bring everybody in, everybody on the entire company that we were purchasing. And the first foremost thing we would talk about always is everybody's going to get paid. You're probably going to get paid faster than you probably were previously, and you're going to have better PTO time. Like, that's the first thing we're selling to them, right?
Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
what everybody really cares about when you're going through a transition, to be like, oh shoot, am I going to lose my paid time that I've been accruing for the past 5 years, or all the
Yeah.
different things,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what our HR team would tackle first, is saying like, let make you feel comfortable at how we operate, to make sure that you're not going to go without pay and being taken care of. And then after that, we would slowly integrate kind of the operational changes, really, once we kind of got bought in, to make sure that, hey, look, we're not coming to wreck house. We're just coming to like try to improve and get better, and, have a bigger team here next year than you currently have now.
Yeah.
And so that's typically how it played out, is just to make them feel comfortable with pay first.
Yeah, I can imagine a huge pain point. I asked because my mother, she owns a women's consignment store, so women's
Okay,
clothing
cool.
store. And she bought it when, the similar, like, this is a very small acquisition, but it was big for her. She had never gone through anything like this,
Yeah,
and she was either deciding to retire, but she wanted to do something. Right, she wanted to do something a little bit different. So there was a women's clothing consignment store, and she ended up purchasing it from an owner who had started the business, grown the business, had got it to a point, was just had some health issues. She just wanted out, didn't know what to do. And my mom had been working for her part time for a little bit. And the woman had said, "Hey, I'm thinking about selling the business, and, would you maybe be interested?" And didn't really want very much for it. So it was a big win for my mom, and she's been able to go in there and, really ramp things up. But now she's
yeah.
looking at selling the business,
Okay.
and she works with a number of women that she's become really, really close with, and they are loyal to her. But her fear is that they're not going to be loyal to the next buyer,
Yeah, yeah,
and she doesn't know how to bring up that conversation. So
yeah,
what you're talking about right now is a little close to home, and I've had these conversations with her many times,
yeah.
but I understand that, like, the similar kind of fear.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's the big elephant in the room for sure is no one knows the new person coming in because everybody hears about it on transaction date. And you're trying to like gain trust within a 15-minute conversation talking in front of a room with people, right?
Yeah,
And that's probably the hardest thing. And honestly, there's just no matter how good of a acquirer you are, I don't care if you're Alex Ramosi or whoever, you're always going to have people leave that were there for a long period of time because they just don't have the relational equity with the person that they had that they
yeah,
built for a long time, you know?
yeah.
So that's just the nature of the beast, I think.
So we got from the company you're working with, doing in cattle ranching as well. Previously, that was this like just out of a high school thing, college thing, or what
This
were
is,
you
yeah,
what were you
in
doing there
college. That's right. Yeah.
in college? All right. So how did we get into Flywheel Financial?
Yeah. So landscape company for 7 years. Then I traded options in the stock market for 2 years after that. And then from there, basically, I feel like the Lord just taught me a ton about just my personality, my life. And so I'm an extrovert by nature. And I don't know why I thought that I could go trade options sitting behind a computer studying stock charts all day, every day in a dark room, you know?
Yeah,
And so I enjoyed it and I love the mentality of investing and that whole world's fascinating to me, but it wasn't what I wanted. It didn't give me energy, right? So it's like,
right.
I knew I was missing out on building a team, collaborating with people, trying to just build something bigger than us with a group of people. So anyway, from there, I joined in with what ultimately became Flywheel Financial. It used to be called CFO Mission, and it was a guy, a friend of mine, lives in town. He started the company in 2017, and he was doing outsourced accounting and fractional CFO work for property management companies in that niche. So I
Specifically for property management companies.
specifically for property management companies. Yeah.
That's a very niche thing,
Yeah.
right? You're looking at a fractional CFO position specifically for one industry. So your target market is really, really narrow.
Yeah. Yeah. But what's cool about it, and I learned from him about this, is that when you're that niche down, you can speak the language so easily of the people that you're in the room with or going to conferences or whatever that
Yeah,
really attracts you to them versus using generic P&L language or generic balance sheet language, right?
yeah,
And so, and that was his background too. Like he was a CFO for a property management company for years, and then ultimately saw a niche that this could be leveraged for a lot of people. And so that's how he started that company. So basically, from 2021, I worked with him trying to build the business up and offered to buy it at the end of 2022. I just love the business model, love the recurring business model of it. I'm not an accountant by education. I just like through what I got to see in the landscape world of doing that for 7 years through acquisitions, plus learning kind of from a fire hose for him for 2 years. Learned a lot about it and offered to buy it. And he laughed it off at the beginning and then came back to me in May of 2023 and said, let's talk about selling the business. And actually, it was before then because we closed May 1st of 2023. So it was kind of one
amazing.
of those things where I didn't expect it to happen, but the stars aligned and he just made it happen. I mean, what ended up making it happen and got to acquire the business. So that was a ton of fun. So since then, we rebranded. And I can kind of go into whole weeds of whatever you have questions on from what we've done since then. But it's been a lot of fun, Brandon, for sure.
What was 2020 and 2021 looking like during COVID, and how did that affect things? Because that was sort of right when you were getting deeply involved, it sounded like.
Yeah. So, well, what's funny is, so I was still trading options full time, and then I would go to help him at his office, a few days a week, just to help him kind of brainstorm and figure out how to get to the next level in business. And so, but all, if you remember, and that's when the GameStop saga and the just craziness was
Oh
happening
yeah,
with the stock
yeah, I
market.
was yeah
And I
Reddit, the
was,
Reddit takeover.
yeah, that's right. I mean, I was on Reddit, I was learning. It was one of those seasons where I was like, what am I doing? This is just crazy. This world is nuts. And I was trading options all day doing that stuff. And so, anyway, it was just a wild time. But that's really what kind of spurred me into getting back into business building and acquisitions and that kind of stuff. So really, then we're his team is 100% remote. We're still 100% remote as well. And so I think really, COVID propelled that to just say like we don't even need an office to kind of do what we're doing. And so I learned a lot through the businesses he was building, and he kind of brought me on to help him scale it. Um, so yeah, and since then we've just kind of been running the play that kind of he established through that acquisition, and now we've gone into a lot more industries since then, since the purchase.
So the are you still involved in acquisitions?
No, so we purchased his business in 23, and then we have not purchased anything since then. I've thought about that, Brandon, just to say like from our growth perspective of where we want to go from an accounting firm.
Hmm.
There's definitely potential there. I've just been very, very focused right now on like providing the best possible service we can. We've grown tremendously through referral based stuff. I'm just now getting into the marketing world. Shout out to Dan Martell, learning from that whole world. And so just trying to get into marketing. But I think there's acquisitions probably in the future. I'm just still trying to build the foundations, the systems and processes that I feel like can take us for decades right now before we jump into acquisitions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, fun.
The customers that come to you, what's the biggest problem that they usually have? What do you hear a lot of when people are seeking out your help? What are the problems that they have that you
Great
typically find?
question. Great question. So we're 100% in the service-based industry. So since the property management world, so we acquired all property managers, and since then I kind of leveraged the landscaping into that world, and we've just kind of honed in on service-based industries. And so the biggest problem we see is a lot of these mom and pop small businesses, it's their wives doing the books or their family members or somebody that just really just can log into QuickBooks and kind of do some things.
Yeah, do a
But
little payroll and a little receivables here and there, but
that's right. Yeah. So they basically have somebody do it. And for people, especially just starting out in business, the finances fall to the wayside. They're just not, everybody's focused on sales and operations and building the team and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of times finances just get in such a bad place where people are like, okay, we're to a point now where like I need trustable data to like understand how to even go forward. Like I don't know, can I afford this next truck that I need, or
yeah.
what's the play there? And so what I tell people is that like I mean, the reality of business is the scoreboard of your business is your financial metrics. Because if you ever sell one day, that's exactly what people are going to look at to see what's going. If you wanted to say if I'm profitable or not, or what's the health of my business, all of it points back to what are the true financials of your business. And so I tell these business owners, like, you have to have accurate business or financial numbers to even understand if you're winning or losing in business. And so really that's the pain point I think people feel is that somebody's been doing it, but it's not accurate. I don't have a clue what our business is doing, and I have no clue how to project out in the future because I'm just looking at what I have in my bank account and I don't know how long that's going to last.
Yeah, you see a few $100,000 in your bank account one day and you're like, "Oh, this is pretty good." But what you don't know is you have, $500,000 in payables that are sitting on your books too. And you're like, "Oh, that's all of a sudden that's toast."
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So we're having those conversations with everybody to try to give them, metrics in real time. Because the other side of it too is that a lot of people just say, "Well, I'll just, make my CPA that I file taxes with do it once a year."
mhm.
And I'm like, you can do that, but imagine if you're trying to like improve and you only get one metric once a year to improve. Like, how long is it going to take you to get to where you want to go if you're just
Oh,
seeing things
so
one
true.
time a year?
Yeah,
Versus if you're trying to lose weight, why would you get on the scale once a year? Get on the scale every day?
yeah.
And so we kind of take that same approach to say, let's do the day to day stuff so you can focus on sales and operations, but we'll give you the metrics all throughout the year to improve, not just once a year when you see it from your CPA.
Yeah, and I find a lot of this, we'll call it, CPAs, or if you have a chartered accountant or a CFO or fractional CFO, a lot of time, if you don't have reoccurring revenue and contracts in place, they're really looking at historical metrics, right? Hey, this is how these projects, or this last month or this last week was produced.
Yep.
And they don't have any sort of projection into the future necessarily, because that's usually driven by a salesperson or an operational, whoever it is that's, input X here that's responsible for processing those sales and that data. So it really is a dance, because you look and they say, your CFO says, hey, we don't have any money in the bank, and you're like, hey, but you know what, these upcoming months right now we have these contracts that we're going to produce. And so I find like it is very much a balance, and that's why you need multiple people in the company in order to understand both of that at a granular level.
For sure. And I think, and the reason we've specialized in the service, and it's a bigger niche for sure than just property management companies, but we love the service industry because so much of your bottom line profit is dictated on labor. And if you
Mm.
can really hone in on understanding labor and how that equates to what you need to see from a revenue perspective, then 9 times out of 10, you're going to see the expected profits that you want to see at the bottom of that business if you can get your labor metrics right. And so
Can you
that's what's been fun for us, is to help people figure that out.
Can you expand on that a bit? Are you talking about, hey, we've assumed it's going to, we've based our price on being able to produce this project with X amount of hours, but not by tracking hours? Like maybe we've allowed 100 hours to do this, but it's taking us 150 hours to produce, so we're not even making nearly as close as much as we thought we were. Is that what you mean by labor metrics?
Yeah, so a lot of it, so you're right on point with it. From a very simplified version, basically,
Very simplified version.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you're running payroll every 2 weeks and your payroll costs you $20,000 every 2 weeks, you need to know how much revenue you should be producing from that labor to sustain a healthy profit. So if I'll give you that example, if you're spending $20,000 in labor every 2 weeks, then you need to be bringing in minimum $40,000 on the gross margin side. So this is kind of the things we talk about with owners, but
Yeah.
basically you have top line revenue, which most people pay attention to. Really what you should be thinking about, especially in the industry that you're in, and you're in construction, right? So like if you're thinking about that world, you have a lot of things that are in the cost of goods that are pass throughs. So you're paying out subs the second you get paid. You pay those subs to go do those things. You're paying out materials, all the things that are not directly related to your internal operations for the people that you have on your team.
Yeah.
You got to weed those things out. So then now let's just say you bring in 100,000, but then you immediately paid out, 60,000 to subs and materials. So now you're left over with 40. And if you're running a payroll every 2 weeks with $20,000, then you need to be at least at that 40 number. And then it's just a multiple of that labor, right? So what we tell people is that like you need 2 is your sweet spot. So just 2 times labor to equal your gross margin numbers to kind of get you to a healthy profit at the bottom line. And it's all about that multiple of labor that you got to figure out to make sure, are you pricing things correctly? Are you quoting things right on the front end to really see what that looks like? And then just keeping an eye on labor as you're going through that project, right? So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
fun conversations, but yes, at the end of the day, it's just math, right, Brandon? It's like, that's what's fun for me, is that numbers don't lie. And so we just make it into a math equation.
Sometimes I wish they did lie a little bit. You know what I mean? Sometimes I wish they did.
Yeah, that's true.
I know. Yeah, they don't. Absolutely. And I think like with us, one of the things that we had implemented quite a number of years ago was the hours that we have each project that we go through. A lot of the projects that we do are very custom.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't a lot of stuff. It isn't working with different stratas or reoccurring revenue. It's not like landscaping where we have ongoing contracts every single week. A lot of the stuff that we do is fairly bespoke and custom when we're talking high end homes that we're building. Right. It's always a very lot different from house A to house B.
Yeah.
So we need a really good way to make sure that the projections that we have on each one of these projects are very, very dialed and very, very understood. And if we don't have that, because there's not really a good rhythm for forecasting reoccurring revenue. That's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And we found that in the early days for sure. Like I remember, I've told the story, my business partner and I, the way that we used to when we first started the company, when we had very few customers, we kind of gathered everyone that we can. We were taking on any sort of projects. We weren't paying ourselves a salary. It was
Yeah.
like we would get paid, a certain amount for a job, and we would sit down on the carpet with a legal pad, and we would write out, hey, this is how much we got paid minus this receipt, and it was on the floor, this receipt, we made these payments, and whatever was left is like, cool, we'll split that.
Yeah.
And that was the business,
Yeah.
right? And there was no, the government wasn't taken into consideration
Yeah,
at
exactly.
all by us at that point. It was like, no, we need to eat, right? We need this money to go in our pocket. If the government wants some money, then they can come for us however they please, and
Yeah.
they did eventually. But this is going back 16 plus
Yeah.
years ago now. So but I think that's how you start out. That's how you
You got
learn
to
these
figure it
things.
out. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
That's
that.
great.
So
Go ahead.
what does Flywheel Financial look like now? You said everybody's remote. What do the staff look like? Um, Currently, what does the organizational structure look like at
Yeah.
this point?
Yeah. So we have basically have 5 team members, and then we have 5 contract bookkeepers as well. So basically 10 people on the team. And we're in tons of different industries now. I mean, anything from marketing agencies to landscapers to dog groomers to pool cleaners to, I mean, all service based, right? But we just random relationships have just popped up through the 2 years that we've been doing this, and we just passed into our third year. And we're just trying to serve business owners, honestly, just to like let them have the scoreboard of their business so they can. And what I love having the conversations with, going back to acquisition, is saying like, what's your long-term plan of this business? Like, do you want to sell in 10 years? Are you just planning on just running it forever? Like, give us the plan, and then we can help you kind of dictate, okay, how do we need to pull money out of the business now to fund your family? But then when you're ready to sell, let's like reserve it so you look more profitable when you're ready to sell, and just having those conversations to really kind of like do what's best for the business owner from a financial perspective.
What
But go ahead.
when people are looking to sell, from my experience, it's like, oh, cool, we have, as far as getting your ducks in order, usually it's all right, we have, we implement some sort of CRM system if we don't have it, and all right, that works well. Okay, cool. Well, we get our books sort of, third party audited, if maybe they do that, but they're kind of ready. We start cleaning up a lot of the processes as we go, right? It's one of those things when if you've ever renovated your house, a lot of the feedback that I get from people that have renovated their houses themselves, they will go through, they'll do a renovation, they'll get it kind of 90% done, and they'll get to the last, 10% or 5% when they, like, weeks before they decide that they're going to put it on the market. And
Yeah.
they've lived with that light switch that's been off the wall, or the baseboard that hasn't quite been installed, or the door that hasn't quite been adjusted yet. But it's been fine. They've been living with it for 6 or 7 years that way.
Yeah.
But when it comes to go to sell, now they're like, you know what? I'm going to fix this thing up. And then all of a sudden, they do some new painting, they get some new trim work on, they fix the landscaping, and now they're thinking, hey, I don't really want to sell this anymore. This is actually a pretty nice place to be. But one of the last things that I think people really start to get in order is a good handle on their financials when they're prepping for sale. That's often one of the last things that they do, is get something that's off of a spreadsheet and into something that's going to be more tangible and more uh, reliable.
Yep.
Is that accurate in your
It is,
experience?
but I do think it's accurate because, yeah, when people start making the decision to sell, and a lot of times it's kind of out of the people's hands or the owner's hands of when it's actually going to sell. You might have it on market for 2, 3, 4 years if you have a specific purchase price that you want to sell it at, right? But when you're looking, I think what the conversations we're having with owners is we're planning way before that. Like if you can say, hey, I
Mm.
want to sell my business in 10 years, for the first 5, 6, maybe even 7, let's freaking pull as much money as we can out of your business to fund your family, like build wealth for you because you are the business owner. Who cares about profits right then? But then for the last 3, 4, 5 years of the business, right before you basically put it up for market, let's make that thing look as profitable as it possibly can to get you the highest EBITDA multiple based on your industry and all that kind of stuff, right? And so we're having those conversations. I think that where people get hurt is when they do, hey, I know I'm going to sell it in 10 years, but I don't need a bookkeeper until 9.5.
Yeah.
It's like, and then you come in and you're like, well, there's nothing really we can do for you in a 6 month period to make your business look magical to be able to sell high. And so it's a long term
Just
plan.
sprinkle a little of that profit dust, if
Yeah,
you
that's
could,
right.
just kind of all over the books there for me, and yeah, we'll have something real.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think, and that's why I loved what we get to do is because once again, it goes back to the measurements and the metrics to improve month over month over month rather than once a year or once every 5 years, especially if you have a plan to sell one day. But honestly, it goes back to the thing we talked about earlier. It's like, do people even really have a long term plan or are they just surviving day to day right now?
I
And so
think
even having those conversations helps.
you mentioned something, go in there, pull out some money from the business to help fund the family and help fund the personal wealth for the owner, and then start really focusing on profit for the company once your own finances are in order. And I want to dive into that a little bit because I love what you said, and I am interested in the theory behind that, because I think there's a lot of people I know that have started small businesses, and they will go their entire career and never take more than, they'll never get themselves a raise, right? They'll pay
Yep.
themselves 80 grand a year, 100 grand a year, whatever that is, for life, and that's it,
Yeah.
because their only concern is about the business itself making money. And then they'll get to a point where they've worked their whole lives, they're at the end of their business, maybe they'll sell their business, maybe they won't be able to, but they've never actually generated the kind of personal wealth that they had hoped when they started this journey of
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. And they get to the end of their journey and they look back thinking, shoot, I should have maybe thought about myself a bit more
Yeah.
as the owner, and set up my family, because ultimately that was why they had started the business in the first place.
100%. Yeah, and so those are the exact conversations we have. And so there's different strategies from like a tax standpoint, right? Of just saying leveraging your business, whether it's buying real estate for your family or whatever it is, to kind of play from the profits of that business to funnel that into something that still points back to your family or kids' college funds or all the different things, right? That you're leveraging the business to go do in certain seasons of that business, right? And so, really, like you said, from a simplified version, it's paying yourself as an owner really, really well in the season that you need to pay yourself as an owner really, really well before you start thinking about let's prep it to really look good for the past 3 years from a sticker price that we're going to sell it at one day. And so, yeah, it's just having those conversations and unique to the owner based on how they want to build wealth and what they want to do for their family. And if they have kids and how they want to set those things up and all those things. And that gets into the tax strategy a little bit as well, which I'm kind of doing a deep dive, honestly, Brandon, right now in this season of my life, just to serve our business owners even more, right? So, like, right now we do the day to day accounting, but there's a world where I just want to serve people from almost like a not advisory, but like a consultant type deal to say like, hey, listen, we know enough, and I'm going to implement it in my own company too, to say like, we know enough about tax strategy to say like, every year that you're writing these fat checks to the government, let's create more creatively and figure out how you can shave some of that off to write checks to your kids versus the IRS, right? And so it's having those conversations to get a plan for each individual business owner.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to. I mean, first of all, everybody's situation is going to be unique to their own, right? Their own goals of their business. Maybe they do want to make as much money as they can personally. Maybe it's they don't value money. But they maybe which I think is, yeah, anybody that says that they don't value money, I think is probably, in my opinion, a bit of a loose cannon, because I think at some level everybody does value money and should value money, because if the people that I talk to anyways, or that are in my world, I know that their value and what they could do would be amplified 10x if they had more money, and they
That's
would
exactly
be
right.
able to
It's a
do
tool.
really great, incredible things with it.
100%.
So I like to remove that blocker away from anybody that I have that conversation with. But for a lot of people, they're pretty happy. They don't want to overcomplicate things, and they feel that if in order for them to make exponential amounts of money, they have to move exponential mountains. And maybe they're at a pretty good place in their life where they have, they're making okay money. Their family is happy. They're spending a lot of time with their kids. They're getting to go on holidays, and that's good. And they don't want to overcomplicate things, so they don't want to continue continue to grow. But at some point, I think it will come up in everybody's life where they're going to think, man, I wish I made more money. If not for me, for my family,
That's right.
for my loved ones, my staff, even, right? My employees. Like I want to
Yeah.
wake up every day, go work hard so that anybody that comes and serves this community and serves this market with me also gets to live an exponential life.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more, Brent. I think to me it just goes back to the deep why in each individual person, right? So like because I think with anything, just like if you have a deep why, that's the thing you have to fall back on when you want to quit. It's like because growing and wanting to make more money is not easy. Right? It's like if you want to just plateau and just sit there forever and you don't have a deep why to go do that, then I'm not going to try to convince you, it's like you got to have your own pull power out of bed every day to say like, no, I want to do more because of the more impact I can have. And like you said, money's a tool, and it's the currency of our world, and so you can use it as a tool to have greater impact. And so if people don't have that desire, then it's hard for me to like be their own motivation for them, if they don't want that. And so I think for us, to me, it just goes back to the why, and then we structure the kind of the plan or just thinking about how do we help them in their business based on the deep why that they have inside of them.
Yeah, I think people say uh, a lot that they don't. Money isn't everything, right? Find some sort of purpose that isn't driven by money. And I think that is all good and fine once the money problems are solved.
That's
Because
right.
I think until then, everything is going to be for money. And it's not until you've solved that money problem where you now can take a step back and say, okay, well, what now? What's
Yeah.
gonna keep me here? But if you are doing anything strictly for money, then once you've made that money, you are going to be less motivated to continue to grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And less, and so I think that it's, but until you get there, until you start making that money and you feel satisfied with the amount of money that you have, money is a really strong motivator and probably
Yeah.
the biggest motivator for most people.
Yeah.
And money for a lot of people, it doesn't necessarily mean money in the bank, but it means freedom.
Yeah. 100%.
And money defines freedom and the ability to not have to stress about going into the office every single day, to not have to stress about, am I going to be able to put fuel in my truck or food on my table
Yeah.
or have enough money to retire. So, and it does, and freedom to go on vacation with my family. But once those needs are met and satisfied,
Yep.
you need to be driven, or I feel strongly that most people need to be driven by something more in order to stay motivated.
Yeah. 100% agree. Because you're exactly right. What is it? The Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever it is. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah. Safety,
Yeah.
security, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So once you have all those things met, which money you have to have money to meet those needs. But once all those things are met, you're exactly right. I think the ability to get up and drive and be motivated to do more and produce more, you have to have that strong why power to go back to, right? And even from a standpoint, it's like I think what people tricks up because I'm in your camp where I'm like, money's a tool, and I trust myself enough to where if we make a ton of money, I'm going to do good things with it.
Yeah.
Versus like if I don't make that money, somebody else is getting that same money because it's all flowing throughout the world. And what are they going to do with it versus what can I do with it? And if it's in my hands, hopefully I'll steward it well and do something great with it. Right. And so, like, for me, I'm not afraid of that because I want to be used almost as a vessel to use money as a tool for good in this world. And so that's the fun thing is that it's not all about just like making all your kids billionaires. It could be about I'm about to give so much money away to these charitable things that I really want to contribute to in the world that are making a real, real big impact, and I can leverage my business to go do those things. And that's where it gets really, really fun for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Man on a mission.
Yeah, It's cool, man. I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Is there any financial advice, or what do you think financial advice that people often take that is bad advice? Is there is there any really bad advice out there? Like go back to my parents, and they were all, pretty conservative folks, right? And when it came to money, and it was just like, you take some money and you put it into RSPs, and this is what you do, and you buy a house, and it's one house, and you pay off that mortgage as quickly as you can, and then you're good. And then, when you retire at 65, you're able to pull some money out, and you can live a pretty simple life after that. Is, you know what I mean? Like, it's it's sound advice, but it's not millionaire billionaire advice. It's not really abundance advice. But what sort of information do you think is out there that people often follow that is probably wrong?
This is a great question, and I have a whole lot of thoughts about this because I think about money a lot. Obviously, we provide certain things for business owners, but from a philosophy of money, uh,
Philosophy of money, yeah.
yeah, from that standpoint, um, what I think people do is they find too much security in what they see in their bank account and what they like have as a mitigated risk type blanket that they think is going to keep them secure, right? Even from the standpoint of like, hey, if I have a certain dollar amount in my bank or my retirement or whatever, I'm financially free. But I think at least the approach that I'm kind of still grasping and knowing is like where life becomes really, really fun is when you do take those big risks that have even bigger payoffs, but you just trust that, even if you fall and hit your face in it, you're still going to get up and keep working because the ability to take risk allows you to have, greater impact, and money has a direct correlation with that, right? And so this is why it's fun for me in the world of business because it's like, okay, well, we can continue to refine our craft and get better and better and better, but what risk can we take, whether it's through acquisition or whatever, to do something if we have a why stronger than than what we're looking at, then let's just face that and take a risk to go get there. So I think for me, if you look back on, if I was 90 years old tomorrow, looking back on my life, I think I would say I would have taken more risks and done it through spending more money to take those risks to just potentially have a greater impact than I would have if I was just safe and secure based on my current bank account.
I think
But, well, sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean, I think when it comes to regret, most people, when you get to the end of their lives, regret the things that they don't do, the risks that they didn't take versus the things that they did. Right?
Yeah,
Anybody can go out and, do something dumb or do something, but at the end of the day, it's like, do I really care? Not much.
yeah,
But what they really do regret is the girl they didn't ask out, or the opportunity that they didn't take because they were scared, or the conversation that they never had that they always knew that they needed to have.
yep.
And it's always those, those things that you don't end up doing, and it comes back to bite you.
Yeah, for sure. And hindsight's always 2020, right? Because you can look at it and be like, man, I should have asked that girl out, or I should have had that conversation or whatever. But in the moment, it's scary. But that's the
Mhm.
reason it's called risk and a leap of faith. You just got to take it and do it. And I'm preaching to myself here when I say that because it's like there's a lot of things I've said no to because of risk.
Mhm.
But like I'm trying to get over that hump because in reality, it's like I'm not scared of work. I want to take risk, and certain things are going to fail, and it's just part of life. But it's worth it at the end in order to take those risks, leverage money to take those risks, to hopefully have the impact that I have in my heart to go have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my grandfather, he's in rough shape right now. He's my last remaining grandparent at this point. He's in the hospital now. He's 94,
Oh wow.
and he's, since he's was for the last 14 years, since his 80th birthday, he's been talking about wanting to go on a family trip to Europe. And every year it's always something that kind of comes up, and he's not really ready to do it, or it's this issue, or we'll do this next year, or whatever that is. And now I know for sure that's never going to happen. And I know that he's at the end of his life, and even something like that, he's going to regret.
Yeah.
and he's not super coherent at this point, so it's not easy to have a conversation with him.
Yeah.
That happened very quickly, but I know, we've talked about it even last year. And I was like, like we should really try and plan this. He's like, what, my passport's expired, and he didn't want to go through the hassle of going and renewing that, and had just put it on the back burner. But it would have been a pretty special moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that, Brandon. I think, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, when you look back on this, like, I mean, you're trying to cultivate these experiences that we have on this planet, right? And so money is a tool for that to kind of create those experiences and do those things. And yes, I think too many of us just get in our comfort zones too much, where we're just like comfortable in what we got going on and don't want to take the leap.
Can you expand on the blanket of safety in the bank account? Because the question that I asked, I believe the answer that you were giving me was take more risks financially, but I might have misinterpreted that. But you were mentioning people seem to have this idea, or they get comfortable with this idea that there's money in the bank account. It's sitting there. That looks good. That feels comfortable. They have a certain baseline, whether that baseline is $1,000, $10,000, 100 grand, $1 million, whatever that is. As long as that money's in there, then they feel safe. But they're not going to take any sort of risk to to lose that. And I know Warren Buffett's one of his famous quotes said, it was either Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, one of the two. I know someone will probably correct me, but it was like, rule number one, don't lose money. Rule number two, see rule number one.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And that was like their biggest thing, right? Making money is great. Just don't lose money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was, very sounded advice from, obviously, Warren Buffett. He's done okay. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it's okay. Yeah.
He's done all right. But I think there's a lot of people there that'll maybe misinterpret that a little bit, and that will stop them from taking any sort of risk at all.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I've heard that quote 1,000 times too. In fact, when I was trading options in the stock market, there were many days where I was like, why didn't I pay attention to those two rules? I should have been paying attention. But I think, I guess the best way to correlate this, and maybe this will help answer the question a little bit, but I think what we've seen in some older generations maybe is it was kind of the industrial age philosophy where like put your head down and work and don't really get a lot of experiences, but you work and work and work to prepare for this retirement one day that's coming down the road. And so you miss out on sometimes your prime of your life because you're working, working, working for a future payoff. There's nothing wrong with that. I love delayed gratification. But then you get to this retirement age and you're um, you're not as healthy. You gotta want to take all these trips and all these things, but your kids are grown, they're out of the house, they're doing their own thing with their own family. And in reality, could you have better spent that money earlier on to create experiences, to do other things with your kids while they were still in the house, or whatever that was, to go just not be afraid to decrease that dollar amount in the security blanket that you have while you're building for this life that you're creating 40 years down the road, right? I think that's probably where I go back to taking more risks because um, I think it goes just back to the mindset of do I have the ability to attract and create more value? So like if you view your bank account as a security, then it means like the money kind of controls you, you don't control the money, right? And so if you're like, well, shoot, if I take a risk and lose 20% of that, what's in the bank account, how long is that going to take me to get that money back to this level that I feel secure again? Versus can I bet on me and say like, well, if I take 20% out, can I 10x it? And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, it's like way bigger than if I were just using that line in my bank account to say like, this is what's giving me security. And it's just kind of the flip reverse psychology, I guess, of that, of just saying like, okay, am I thinking about me and my ability to produce and add value? Or am I thinking about the money that I've accrued over time that determines the value that I have? I don't know if
What's
that makes
giving what's giving you the confidence to bet on yourself?
experience. And
Experience,
well, there's
reps.
two things. I mean, for people that are people of faith, I mean, the Lord has done so many remarkable things in my life. And so like I'm trusting in him first, and he gives
Yeah.
me kind of like this, like a little bit. I mean, I still have fear and I'm still risk averse in a lot of different ways, but he's given me more of a confidence to say like he's my provider, my bank account's not my provider. And
Mhm.
so that's number one, gives me the ability to kind of approach life that way. And then number two, I've just seen him do things in my life where I should have failed or should have like fallen on my face, but it turned out better than I thought. It's like so experience kind of speaks to that a little bit.
Yeah, there was a book that I'm reading, or I've read. It's a course in miracles.
Oh, I
I
haven't
don't
heard
know
of
if
it.
you've known.
Uh,
Anyways, I'd open it up, and it was. I'm totally gonna paraphrase this here, but it had said, God will provide miracles. However, you must be in a position where you are open and willing to see and receive them,
yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Something along those lines. So it's like there's going to be a lot of those opportunities, but if you haven't put in the work, you haven't asked for the clarity, you haven't built up that confidence, then you're not going to be able to see that opportunity when it goes by. And I use that analogy, like I look outside my office and I watch the cars go by, and I'm like, every single one of those cars, right? This is a metaphor, but every single one of those cars, if you look at those as an opportunity for whatever that is,
Yeah,
you just don't know. You don't know who's sitting in the car. You don't know where that person is going because you don't have that information. You don't know what that person is thinking, or the group of people, is that vehicle out of gas, is that person, are they in a really sound place? Like, you just don't have enough information. But there's so many opportunities that go by, but if you're not open and willing to see them, or have the whether it's an open mind, an open heart, the ability to have the conversation with somebody, like all of these opportunities are just going to continue to drive by you. They are out there, but you need to be in a place where you are willing and ready to see them for what they are.
I love that, Brandon. This goes directly back to some of the conversations I have with business owners about margin in their business and in their life. When people literally, you have to understand how to create margin in your business because then you can't jump on opportunities as you see opportunities or the Lord sends something through that is an opportunity for you because you haven't prepared well before then. Right. And so, like, for people to figure out how to profit well, and obviously we have the talks of like pushing money to your family or keeping the business or whatever, but you have to understand to like when you have profit in your business and healthy profit in your business, you have the ability to like do things for your employees that other employers don't have the ability to do. You have the ability to jump on acquisitions or potential things for growth that other people don't have to do. So like there's massive opportunity with margin, but you have to be disciplined enough to build the margin. And that's what we try to go back to. And that's true for not just finances. Obviously, that's true for life too. If you're just constantly bogged down in busy work all day, every day, you're not looking at cars passing by the road, be like, that's an opportunity. You just
Yeah.
miss so many things in life when you don't have margin.
Yeah, I mean that's a really valid point, and it's easy to say, "Hey, if you have more money, you can do more things," and it's sometimes as simple as that. But the discipline to build margin, and when you're running a business, it's like, okay, well, you don't want to over leverage yourself, but you have to, it's all these sort of minute details, right? It's like we don't want to overcompensate people. We don't want to hang on to underperformers. We don't want to, buy new vehicles if they're not going to be making money because, they're going to require maintenance, and they're going to, do this, and understanding tax strategy, like all this stuff that we're talking about needs to be looked at by somebody that has good financial insight, and
Yeah.
somebody like yourself, because that's where I think you can come in, or somebody in your organization can come in, really do a deep dive in the company and look at, what your comp structure is whack. Why are you paying yourself this when you should be paying a holding company
Yeah.
rather than
Exactly.
a salary, or whatever that is, to really start saving some money to make that margin to be able to provide those opportunities.
Yeah. That's so good. And one quick
If
story.
you, if you want me to sell your businesses for you, like I'm, I can do that.
Oh,
If that was a pretty good pitch, like
oh, I
I
love
have
it.
no commission, no problem picking up the phone and making
Yeah,
a few
absolutely.
calls
We
for
need some
commission.
salespeople in Canada. Let's do it. No, I love that, bro. I think that's awesome. And to your point, this has become one of my favorite things we do as a company. Once a quarter, we call it personal goal check-ins. So I meet one-on-one with every single team member on our team, and we're doing this next week to prepare for Q3. And I meet with them, and we spend a full hour, and we don't talk about anything but just their personal goals.
Mm-hmm.
And all I'm thinking about in the back of my head is, because we have the discipline to create margin in our business, if they have something that they deeply desire and they're an awesome team member on our team, how the heck can the company, I mean, how can we figure out a way for the company to provide something for them? Right.
Yeah.
And it's just so much fun for me because they're getting to share things that I may or may not know about them or their family or whatever they're trying to do in that season of life. And I'm just thinking, how can we leverage the business to go do that because we have the margin to do it? And
Yeah.
it is so much fun. And so, like, when you don't have margin, you can't have those conversations. It's like, well, I'm sorry, well, whatever you're paying you now, we can't raise it or we can't do anything because, like, we got to figure out a way to make more money, you know? And so it's
Man.
just so much fun to have those conversations for me.
Yeah. I love it. Awesome, my man. We did it. I got to wrap things up. I could
Yeah.
stay here and I like promise me you'll come back and do it again.
Oh, I'd love to,
We could go
Brian.
on. We could go on for ages. I got to rock and roll though. But man, where can people find you?
Yeah. So I'm new to the Instagram game. 2025, I just established my first Instagram, but I'm all in on it. So I love it. I'm trying to be very available there. So really, Instagram's the best place. My Instagram handle, I'll send it to you later, but it's Austin D. McMillan. And you can just go find me on there. And in fact, anybody that's listening, if y'all want, I've created a free guide of how to set up your bank accounts to profit first as a business. You can do this individually as well. But if anybody wants that free guide, I kind of have a video walkthrough of that. If you'll just shoot me the word profit in the direct message on Instagram, I'll send it back to you. And we try to help all of our business owners set up their bank account so it at least gives them a first start to paying themselves first, paying the tax man, doing all things correctly every time you get paid. So, anyway, love to serve your audience that way.
Love that. Yeah, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Austin, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Sweet home Alabama, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. I really appreciate
All right. Awesome, man. For the rest of you out there that are still with us, till next time, rock and roll. Have a great day.